Hey guys, welcome back to another video on this channel. What you see here is a game running in Unity that I built with the very latest Grok 4.6 that's been released by Elon Musk's SpaceX AI. I think that's what they call themselves now. Now, Grok 4.6 was just released, and the reason why it's hitting headlines is that if you look at this table over here, you can see that it's actually comparable to things like Fable 5 and GPT 5.6 Sol Max, basically the strongest models from OpenAI and Anthropic. But ultimately, as you know me on this channel, I don't focus too much on benchmarks. I focus on what kind of games and applications you can actually build with these models. As you can see here, I'm panning around within the Unity game engine, and you can see this model over here. This model was fully animated within Blender by Grok 4.6. All I did was just pass in a bunch of prompts. I wanted it to do a wave, I wanted it to jump happily, and it was able to take a model that I already had rigged, animated entirely, and then export it out into this game that you see over here. And I managed to get this entire thing working, built, and running within Unity without writing a single line of code or even touching the Unity editor. So if you ever wanted to know how to build 3D games in the Unity game engine using an AI-powered agent like Grok 4.6, this video is for you. Now, before we jump in, if you're interested in building games using AI, you definitely want to check out gamedev.com. This is my all-in-one resource for everything that you need to know about building games using AI tools. You'll find many different things, including specialized game development AI agent skills that you can use to build games. So for example, in today's video, I have a Unity CLI skill that you see over here, and this is exactly what I've been using to build all of the Unity demos and games that you've been seeing on this channel. You will also find all of the resources, including the full source code, prompts, guides for many of the games that you see me build. One of the most recent projects that I've included is this 2.5D battle arena that you see over here. And this is running completely within the Unity game engine, was vibe coded using all of the skills. And this includes all of the game logic, the entire arena that you see here, as well as every single animated 2D sprites that you see over here. Vibe Game Dev members also get bonus credits to use with Spriterrific, and there's also a private Discord community where you can hang out with other game development vibe coders. Head on over to vibegamedev.com to check it all out. And without further ado, let's dive right into how I went about creating this game that you see over here using Grok 4.6. All right, so here we are. And while you can use Grok build to access Grok 4.6, I actually made use of a cursor. And the way that you can do it is that you can just go down here, click on this, and just choose Cursor Grok 4.6 as your model. I use a mixture of high and extra highs and fast mode. And in case you didn't know, SpaceX AI have acquired Cursor. And that's the reason why Cursor also got 4.6 at the same time. And also for a limited time for this week, you get twice the amount of usage. So basically half price if you use it within Cursor and Grok build. Okay, I did not build this entire game in one shot. I did use a bunch of what I would call Gauntlet loops. And if you want to learn more about Gauntlet loops and how you can use it for game development, definitely check out my other videos. The idea here is that I'm going to show you how I iterated upon this, just starting from a text prompt all the way through to how I created all the different models, animated them, and then played around with the settings until I was able to get to a result that I liked that you see over here. So the very first thing that I did is I went into Cursor and I started with a completely blank project. And the only things that I had were a bunch of skills that you see over here. So I have a bunch of Blender skills, I have a bunch of FAL AI skills, and then I have a Meshy skill, as well as a Unity CLI skill. So it was basically these skills and a completely blank project that I started from to build this entire project. So if you want to get hold of these skills, they are available to my members at vibegamedev.com. But I'll also talk to you a little bit about how you can create your own version of these skills. Okay, so I just started off with a very simple prompt. I just said, I want to create a Unity game vertical slice using Blender to model the characters and the environments. And I want them to then be integrated into Unity. I mentioned the style that we're trying to go for, so kind of like whimsical, cute style Animal Crossing, Nintendo Switch. And I said I want it to be easy to understand when I demonstrate them in clips on social media. I want a small diorama where people can walk around, and then I wanted to have polished visuals and shaders. And so what I did was then, you can see here, I just used the FAL AI image skill. And this is just a skill that I have that allows me to very easily make use of FAL.ai, which actually stands for features and labels, which is something that I just learned about. All right, and within it, it allows me to access any of the latest image to generation models that you can see over here. What I did first of all was I said I wanted it to just create mockups of how the game might look like. I made use of Grok Imagine 2.0, which is the latest image generation model. And you can see here, these are the initial results. So it kind of gives you kind of like a look and feel of how things should turn out. But obviously, because these are mockups, they're going to look a little bit more high fidelity. And I just use these as a visual style and a visual guide. I find it very useful when you are prototyping games because it gives the AI a sense of what you want to achieve. And you can see here, right? Like even though this is different, so you can see this little pawn over here, even the character, and then this little house, you can see that there's a lot of inspiration that was drawn from these mockups. So that was the first step that I did. And then the next thing that I did, I actually went ahead and asked Grok 4.6 to make use of Blender using MCP to create all the models based on the mockups that we had over here. And this is quite an interesting part. This is actually one of the refined models that we ended up with after a couple of prompts. And you can see here, this is one of the early stages of the initial models that it was able to make. This is another one, the leaf line. And then you can see here, it then tried to create the raccoon. And you never have to really worry too much about these initial versions that come out of AI, because the whole point is that you want it to iterate towards getting better. And while you, in the past, you would have probably had to iterate it by hand, you can use some kind of, like mini gauntlet loop over here. So you can see here, I say, I wanted the raccoon to kind of like be set in its own file. And then I say continue with the slime and island towards the North Star mockup. So these mockups over here are kind of like your North Star, which is kind of your target and your goal. And I said, use up the agents to score until it passes. And basically I make use of Cursor's loop feature. So you can do /loop over here. So basically this says that it will run in a loop trying to achieve the goal that you set for it. It will just keep going and going and going until it achieves the goal. I like to set a timer between 2 minutes to 5 minutes so that it gives it some time to actually make the changes and to perform the assessments. But you can also set, I think, down to 30 seconds, and then you can have longer time limits as well. But effectively, this will cause it to go through several iterations. So you can see here, it starts to iterate and the world starts looking a lot better. And the way that it goes about iterating is that it makes use of this Blender MCP live skill that I have over here. So it will actually make iterations on these models that you see over here live. And then after that, it uses this Blender headless skill to prepare the exports for Unity. And after it got to a fairly okay stage, what I did is that I said, let's get these games working within Unity. And then you'll use this Unity CLI skill that I have over here to go ahead and integrate it within the Unity game engine. What I'd like to do is I always like to ask it to take screenshots as it goes along the way. Okay, so you can see here, these are the early versions of how the game looked. So there's not a lot of lighting, but it managed to import all the assets from Blender incorrectly, and then it starts to place them all around. After that, I basically set it on a mini gauntlet loop to continue to iterate on it until it looks more polished and continues to look a lot more like the mockup images. You can see here it starts to add some lighting, and then as time goes on, it will add in some shaders. I'm going to go into scene view over here, and you can see that this 3D model actually has a kind of like outline shader on it as well. Okay, and so this is effectively what it does. I like to just let it loop a couple of times and then ask it to assess it and then to continue to make improvements throughout. Now, one thing that you notice is that this raccoon that you see over here is very different from the one that you see in Blender. And the reason for that is that as good as Grok 4.6 is and the Blender MCP, it's okay when you're making inanimate objects or very simple objects like this. But the moment you have something that's a bit more humanoid, I found that it's still not quite there yet, or at least I did not run it for enough cycles for it to reach a stage that I want. And so what I did was I made use of a tool called Meshy. This is basically an AI platform that allows you to create 3D models for your games. This is not sponsored in any way, but I've been using Meshy for a really long time now. I think I've used it for more than a year. Meshy allows you to effectively make really nice looking models just by supplying reference images. And you can see this other video, which ironically tells you to not use Unity back then, but effectively it was about how you can create really good looking 3D games using Meshy. The biggest difference between how I used Meshy in the past and now is that in the past, I'll drag and drop a reference image over here, but nowadays, I really like to just stay within whatever agent harness that I'm using, whether it's Cursor, Grok Build, Codex, Cloud Code, whatever. So what I actually did over here is I said, let's use Meshy to generate the model from the image and then get it into a state that is game ready. And all I did was I just created an API key, put it into my project, and then I asked the agent to effectively make use of the API so that I don't have to drag and drop things within here, download the models and integrate it into my gate. It just does it automatically. And so you can see I just passed in a bunch of the docs over here. And what I did is that after I used the API for a little bit, I basically created a Meshy skill that you see over here. And this allows me to generate models, animate them, rig them, download and integrate it within my game. It's just a lot nicer this way. It allows me to stay within my agent and I don't have to mess about in the web interface at all. So what I did was I generated something called a turnaround So I basically said I want a front view, side view, back view, and top view. And the reason for this is that Meshy actually allows you to do something called multi-view. And I'm just going to show you here in the web interface. Okay, so you can pass in the main, left, back, and right. There's no top. Once I generated the image, I basically said use the turnaround image, split it into individual images, and use the multi-image to 3D. And I find that this allows you to get much better results, especially when your character might have something like a bag behind him, as well as a tail. And, it just gives you a slightly more better results, so it doesn't have to guess things that are behind the character. Okay, so that's how I like to use Meshy. And effectively, once this was done, I just continued to just prompt it. You can see I just say, can we get an idle and run animation? And then it will just automatically hook everything up and then get it ready. And then with the skill, it was able to then integrate it directly into the game. Okay, so that's how I got this character into the game. And Meshy comes with a lot of different, standard animations. So I'm able to have this kick animation that you see over here, so where I can kick these little slimes. However, one thing to point out is that you don't have to feel constrained by the animations from Meshy, because as you saw earlier in the video, you can actually use Grok 4.6 to create custom animations as well. So you can see over here, this character, the idle animation is the same, but this waving animation and then this jumping and talking animation, these animations were actually custom made using Grok 4.6 using the Blender MCP. So you can just see over here, all of these were not part of Meshy. These were all custom animations. So I just went ahead and said, let's use the file image skill with Grok Imagine Image 2.0 to create a turnaround for another character to be used as an NPC. So you can see here, right? It's just all prompts. I don't have to do anything more complicated than this. I just said, generate an image, then use Meshy to create a character. And then after that, I said, with this new character, can we get it into Blender? Use the Blender MCP Live to do a custom animation. And then I would love to see the Blender editor open with it animated, which is exactly what you see over here. And that's all I did. It was able to basically do a bunch of different animations. And I think this is really great because in the past, you probably have to export it and then get it into Mixamo and do a bunch of stuff and rely on some bespoke animations that you have out there. But in this case, you can pretty much just prompt whatever animation that you want. So that's how you can see here the turnaround image. And then this was the Meshy preview that came up. And then you can see that this is how it looked like when it integrated it into the game. And I just stitched everything together. I asked Grok 4.6 to iterate on a new upgraded looking version of the map, and it was able to end up with this stage. And then I asked it to provide some post-processing and continue to iterate to make the level look nicer. And that's where you can use a gauntlet loop or mini gauntlet loop. You don't have to have it run for hours and hours. You can just ask it to run maybe for half an hour and see how it's doing. And usually it gets pretty far on its own. And then the final thing that I did was I said that I wanted to have some gameplay mechanics. So I just prompted it and said, I wanted to have this quest system. So I walk up to it. I'm able to, interact with this NPC. It gives me a quest. And then the quest here is to just, kick a bunch of blobs. And I'm going to kick one. And then I'm going to kick two. And then I think there's one hiding over here. And there's only two here. I'm going to kick this one again. And then there's one here. I got the fourth and then the fifth. All right. Missed it. Okay. And then that is done. I go back, press E. And he says, thanks. He does that happy little jump. And then that's the end of that quest. And you can imagine, right? Like this is, almost enough for you to show as a vertical slice, and you can build upon this to make this game more or less complicated as you wish. All right, so that's it for today's video. I hope you found this useful. I think the big takeaway here is that Grok 4.6 is really intelligent and really good, but because it's so fast and so cheap, it's really appropriate for game development where you're doing a lot of little iterations. And so I'm really excited with this new model release. I'm going to be playing around a lot more with it, and ultimately being able to have animations, custom animations driven by AI using Blender, as well as modeling them, I think it's a huge unlock. So I really hope you enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to give it a like, hit that subscribe button, and turn on notifications so that you'll always be the first to know when new content like this drops. Now, I've been talking a lot about gauntlet loops, and you might have heard a lot about it as well. So if you want to learn more about how it works and why it's so useful, especially for game development, you want to check out this video over here, where I was able to build an entire 2.5D RPG-like game using the gauntlet loop. And there are a lot of lessons to be learned from there that I've used and applied for today's video. So if you want to learn more about it, definitely check out this video right over here. All right, so till next time, I'll see you.